Billions of dollars are spent every year on sleep aids, anxiety medications, muscle relaxants, and blood sugar drugs. Billions. And yet the mineral that regulates every single one of those functions, the one your heart literally cannot beat without costs, almost nothing, grows in your garden, has been eaten for thousands of years. And right now, an estimated 80% of Americans aren't getting enough of it. The mineral is magnesium, and what modern medicine calls hypomagnesemia chronic. Systemic deficiency, your great-grandmother simply called not eating your greens. Today we're counting down 12 magnesium-rich plants that ancient civilizations understood, scriptures preserved, and modern science is now scrambling to validate plants you can grow, forage, or find at any grocery store. Some you already have in your kitchen right now. Pay attention to number 1 on our list. It was banned by a Spanish emperor 500 years ago, not because it was dangerous, but because it was too powerful. And the reason why will completely change how you think about food and control. But first, stay with me through number 6, because we're going to stop and tell you the story of a prophet in the desert, 3 days from death. And the exact plant that brought him back, that isn't metaphor. That's physiology. And the science of what happened in that moment will stay with you. Number 12. Basil. The sacred herb of the nervous system. Most people think of basil as a pizza topping. The ancients thought of it as protection. In Sanskrit, the word for holy basil tulsi literally means the incomparable one. The Charaka Samhita, one of the foundational texts of Ayurvedic medicine composed around 600 BCE, documents basil as a rasayana, a class of herbs specifically used to restore vitality, strengthen the nervous system, and extend lifespan. Across the Mediterranean, Greek physicians associated sweet basil with recovery from exhaustion. In ancient Egypt, dried basil was discovered inside sealed tomb offerings, placed there not as food, but as a medicine for the journey ahead. 3 civilizations, 3 independent conclusions. The same plant. Modern analysis helps us understand why. Basil contains magnesium in meaningful amounts, roughly 37 milligrams per 100 grams of fresh leaves. But what's more significant is how that magnesium interacts with basil's other active compounds, linalool, a terpene also found in lavender, has been studied for its effects on the GABA receptor system, the same neurological pathway targeted by prescription anti-anxiety medications. Eugenol, another compound concentrated in basil's oils, has demonstrated anti-inflammatory properties in laboratory studies, with researchers noting effects on the COX-2 pathway, the same pathway targeted by ibuprofen. The combination of magnesium's role in regulating cortisol and these complementary phytochemicals may explain why ancient healers consistently reached for basil during periods of stress, illness, and nervous exhaustion. Here's what most guides omit. The magnesium in fresh basil is significantly more bioavailable than in dried. Heat and extended drying degrade the cellular matrix that holds these minerals. If you're growing basil, eat the leaves fresh, torn by hand, not chopped with metal, and add them after cooking. Not during. 1 generous handful of fresh basil stirred into warm olive oil with a pinch of sea salt, eaten with bread, is closer to how ancient Mediterranean populations actually consumed it than any supplement capsule will ever be. The ancients didn't call it stress relief. They called it harmony. The research is beginning to examine why they were right. Number 11. Pumpkin seeds. The warrior's pocket medicine. Before protein bars, before electrolyte gels, before sports nutrition existed as an industry, there were pumpkin seeds. The Aztec Empire maintained vast agricultural systems, and pumpkin, the entire plant, seeds included, held a place of ceremonial and medicinal significance. Seeds were pressed for oil, ground into pastes, and carried by long-distance runners known as the tamim, human couriers who could cover 100 miles on foot in a single day. The Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy of North America, included pumpkin seeds in their three sisters planting system, corn, beans, and squash treating the trio, not just as food crops, but as a complete nutritional system. Meanwhile, in the Ottoman Empire, pumpkin seed oil was used in formal medical practice to support kidney and bladder health. 3 continents. The same seed, pumpkin seeds are among the most magnesium-dense whole foods on the planet. A single ounce, roughly a small palmful, provides approximately 156 milligrams of magnesium, nearly 40% of the daily recommended intake for an adult. But the mechanism that made them so valuable to ancient warriors goes deeper than mineral content. Pumpkin seeds are one of the few plant sources of tryptophan, the amino acid precursor to serotonin and melatonin. Magnesium is required to convert tryptophan into serotonin. So the seed provides both the raw material and the catalyst for neurotransmitter production, a self-contained system for mood, stability, and sleep regulation. Clinical studies have found associations between pumpkin seed consumption and improved sleep quality in adults, specifically reduced time to sleep onset and fewer nighttime awakenings. The researchers attribute this to the combination of tryptophan, magnesium, and zinc, all present in significant quantities. The preparation detail most people miss raw. Unshelled pumpkin seeds retain more of their phytosterols than roasted ones. But lightly dry toasted seeds, warmed in a pan for 3 to 5 minutes without oil increase bioavailability of zinc, specifically without meaningfully degrading magnesium content. A tablespoon eaten 30 minutes before bed, with a small piece of raw honey, aligns with traditional use patterns from multiple cultures. The warriors didn't know what tryptophan was. They knew they slept better and fought longer. The research is starting to confirm the mechanism. Number 10. Fenugreek, the seed that ancient physicians prescribed like medicine. Fenugreek appears in the Ebers Papyrus, an Egyptian medical document from approximately 1550 BCE, one of the oldest complete medical texts ever discovered. The scribes described it as a treatment for fever, respiratory conditions, and internal imbalance. Hippocrates, writing centuries later in Greece, recommended it for the same applications. The Talmud records fenugreek as one of the foods a woman should eat after childbirth to restore her strength. In traditional Chinese medicine, fenugreek seeds, called huluba, have been used since the Tang dynasty to warm the kidneys and restore yang energy. A3. 500-year trail of consistent medical use across 4 distinct healing traditions. For the same cluster of conditions, fenugreek seeds contain approximately 68 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams, significant for a seed. But their most studied active compound is 4-hydroxysoleucine, an unusual branched amino acid that appears to directly stimulate insulin secretion from pancreatic beta cells. Human clinical trials, including a 2009 study published in the International Journal for Vitamin and Nutrition Research, found that fenugreek supplementation measurably improved glycemic control in patients with type 2 diabetes. The mechanism is being studied further, but the signal is consistent enough across multiple trials to sustain serious scientific interest. Here's what most people never learn about fenugreek preparation. The seeds must be soaked before use, and the soaking water should be consumed, not discarded. Overnight, soaking in room temperature water for 8 to 10 hours softens the hard outer coat, making the seeds magnesium and soluble fiber, a specific type called galactomannan, far more accessible to the body. The water becomes slightly viscous, slightly bitter, and slightly sweet. Ancient physicians would recognize this as the medicine itself. 1 teaspoon of whole seeds soaked overnight, eaten in the morning with the soaking water. Before any other food, this is the preparation that most closely matches traditional use patterns. The ancients prescribed it. The papyrus preserved it. The clinical trials are now explaining why it worked. Number 9. Cilantro, the detox plant ancient healers knew before toxicology existed. Cilantro appears in the Book of Numbers in the Hebrew Scriptures, chapter 11. Verse 5. Listed among the foods the Israelites remembered longingly from Egypt, It was familiar enough, beloved enough, that people in the wilderness specifically named it when describing what they missed. That detail tells you something about how embedded it was in ancient daily nutrition independently. Cilantro was documented in Sanskrit Ayurvedic texts as a cooling herb to be eaten during periods of inflammation and heat. Chinese physicians included coriander, the seed of the same plant, in formulas for digestive complaints. In colonial-era South America, Spanish missionaries documented indigenous populations using cilantro root preparations for what appeared to be liver conditions. Pour tradition. One plant, the same general application. Modern research has produced a genuinely surprising finding about cilantro. Laboratory and animal studies suggest that cilantro leaf, not seed. Leaf may support the body's clearance of heavy metals, particularly lead and mercury. By a process researchers describe as chelation support, the proposed mechanism involves cilantro's compounds binding to metal ions and assisting their passage out of the body through normal elimination pathways. This is preliminary research. Human clinical trials are limited and ongoing, but the finding is consistent enough across multiple laboratory studies that it has attracted serious attention from environmental medicine researchers. Cilantro provides magnesium, potassium, and vitamins A, C, and K in meaningful quantities per serving. The key preparation note: heat rapidly degrades cilantro's volatile oils and a portion of its mineral content. Traditional use patterns: eaten fresh, stirred into soups and stews after they come off the heat, or consumed as a cold steeped herb water. Preserve far more of the active compounds than cooking does. A cold infusion of fresh cilantro, a handful of leaves and stems, in 2 cups of cold water, refrigerated for 4 hours, produces a mild, grassy drink that delivers bioactive compounds in a form the plant evolved to provide them. The ancient cooks didn't have toxicology departments. They had the taste of the food and the way their bodies felt. The research is now trying to catch up. Number 8. Lentils. The survival food that appears in the first book of the Bible, Genesis 25. Esau returns from the field exhausted. The Hebrew word used suggests complete physical depletion and finds his brother Jacob cooking a red stew. The text says Esau asked for some of that red stuff because he was faint. The stew was made of lentils. He valued it enough to make one of the most consequential trades in the entire biblical narrative. This is not a story about impulsive decision-making. Read it physiologically. A man depleted of energy, likely suffering from hypoglycemia, encounters a food that would rapidly restore blood sugar stability, provide sustained protein, and deliver a significant mineral payload, including magnesium. His body knew what it needed. Lentils are one of the magnesium-richest legumes available, delivering approximately 71 milligrams per cooked half-cup serving, along with iron, folate, and slow-digesting complex carbohydrates that produce a remarkably stable glycemic response. A 2010 clinical trial, published in the Archives of Internal Medicine, found that legume consumption, specifically including lentils, was associated with significantly improved glycemic control in type 2 diabetic patients. The researchers attributed the effect to the combination of protein, fiber, and mineral content slowing glucose absorption. Here's the preparation detail. Almost no one discusses. Lentils are more magnesium available when cooked without salt until the last few minutes. Salt added early during cooking toughens the outer skin, creating a barrier that actually reduces the breakdown of phytates, compounds that bind minerals and block absorption. Cook your lentils in plain water until nearly tender. Then salt. The difference in texture is noticeable. The difference in mineral absorption is measurable. Red lentils, the split variety, absorb fastest and require no soaking. They dissolve into a thick, golden broth within 20 minutes. A bowl with a squeeze of lemon juice adds vitamin C, which further enhances iron and magnesium absorption. This is approximately how the ancient recipe likely worked. Even if Esau didn't know the biochemistry, the biblical account preserved a piece of nutritional knowledge for 4,000 years. The clinical trials are now confirming what Esau's exhausted body already understood. If this kind of ancient knowledge resonates with you, The idea that the most powerful medicine was hiding in your grandmother's kitchen all along. Hit like and subscribe, because what's coming in the next 5 entries goes even deeper into plants that scripture, history, and modern science all agree on. Don't miss it. Number 7. Parsley. The herb Romans carried into battle. Roman soldiers carried dried parsley on military campaigns, not as a garnish, as a functional food for endurance, and what Roman military physicians called claritas mentis, clarity of mind. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder wrote that parsley was always acceptable and described its use for treating kidney complaints and fatigue. The ancient Greeks crowned victorious athletes with parsley at the Nemean and Isthmian Games, not laurel, as is commonly assumed, but parsley. They placed it on tombs to honor the dead. It was simultaneously a symbol of vitality and of restoration. In Ayurvedic tradition, parsley root was used as a diuretic and kidney tonic. In medieval European herbalism, it was classified as warming and drying, prescribed for what physicians of the time described as heaviness and stagnation symptoms we might now recognize as fluid retention and sluggish lymphatic function. Modern analysis reveals that parsley is extraordinarily dense, with active compounds relative to its small serving size. 2 tablespoons of fresh flat-leaf parsley, an amount you might scatter over a dish without thinking, provides approximately 11 milligrams of magnesium and over 200% of the daily recommended vitamin K. Vitamin K is required for proper calcium metabolism. Specifically, it helps direct calcium into bones rather than arterial walls. Magnesium works synergistically with vitamin K in this process. The ancient Roman soldiers who ate parsley were, unknowingly, managing their cardiovascular mineral balance on long campaigns. The compound most researchers are now studying is apigenin, a flavonoid present in meaningful concentrations in parsley. Laboratory studies suggest apigenin has anti-inflammatory properties and may modulate anxiety pathways by interacting with GABA receptors, the same system that Basil's linalool affects. Some researchers describe it as a mild, natural anxiolytic. Human trials are limited. The science is still developing. Preparation precision fresh flat-leaf parsley contains significantly more apigenin and magnesium than dried. Curly parsley has a slightly different phytochemical profile and is less bioactive. A parsley tea, 2 generous handfuls of fresh flat-leaf stems and leaves, simmered gently in 2 cups of water for 5 minutes. Not boiled. Then strained and drunk warm produces a deep green liquid with a clean, slightly bitter, faintly celery-like taste. This is closer to how ancient Mediterranean populations consumed it medicinally. 1 cup in the morning, before breakfast. Pliny called it always acceptable. Modern phytochemistry is discovering exactly why. Number 6. Dandelion greens. The weed that was once the first medicine of spring. 1 Kings. Chapter 19. The prophet Elijah has just had the most dramatic victory of his life, fire from heaven. In the end of a years-long drought, and within 48 hours, he is running for his life into the desert. He collapses under a juniper tree. He asks God to let him die. He is, by any clinical definition, in crisis, dehydrated, hypoglycemic, exhausted to the point of suicidal despair. Then something remarkable happens. He falls asleep, and an angel, the Hebrew word, malach, a messenger touches him and says, "Arise and eat." When Elijah looks, there is a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. He eats. He sleeps again. The messenger comes a second time, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." And the scripture records that Elijah rose and ate, and on the strength of that food, traveled 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb. 1 meal, 40 days of strength. Scholars debate what the cake was made from, but ancient wilderness travelers in the Levant, when completely depleted and far from cultivation, would often forage bitter greens, dandelion, chicory, sorrel, and bake them with whatever grain flour they carried into rough flatbreads. These bitter greens are extraordinarily rich in magnesium, iron, and potassium. When a body is depleted past a certain threshold, what we now call severe electrolyte imbalance. Restoration of these minerals can produce effects that feel almost miraculous: return of muscular strength, clearing of mental fog, stabilization of heart rhythm, resolution of the crushing fatigue that had made death feel preferable to continuing. That isn't just poetry. That's a description of cellular restoration. Dandelion greens contain approximately 36 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams, along with iron, calcium, and a bitter compound called taraxacin, which stimulates bile production and liver function. Bile production is how the body processes and eliminates fat-soluble toxins. The liver, running low on minerals, becomes sluggish. Dandelion greens essentially wake it back up. A 2011 study in evidence-based complementary and alternative medicine found dandelion extract demonstrated measurable effects on oxidative stress markers in laboratory models. Human clinical trials are ongoing. The signal is consistent with centuries of clinical observation. Preparation: the young leaves picked before the plant flowers. When they are smaller and less intensely bitter, have a taste similar to arugula. They can be eaten raw in a salad dressed with olive oil, lemon, and raw honey. Older leaves, which are more bitter, are best briefly blanched 30 seconds in boiling water, then immediately transferred to cold water, which reduces bitterness by about 40% without meaningfully degrading magnesium content. Drink the blanching water, cooled, as a mild liver tonic. Elijah slept on the ground in a desert, ate a single rough meal, and walked for 40 days. The mineral content of what he ate may have saved his life. We're just now beginning to understand the mechanism. Number 5. Nettle leaf. The iron and magnesium plant that medieval hospitals actually used. Before antibiotics, before hospitals as we know them, in medieval European monastic infirmaries, the closest thing most people had to medical care for 1,000 years, nettle was a primary treatment for anemia, joint pain, and fatigue. The monks grew it in their physic gardens, alongside hyssop, say, and rue. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century abbess and physician, whose medical writings are among the most detailed of the medieval period, described nettle as warming and strengthening to the blood. She prescribed it specifically for people emerging from long illness, what we would now recognize as post-infectious fatigue. In Ayurvedic medicine, Urtica dioica stinging nettle is classified as a Raktapitta herb, meaning it works specifically on the blood and heat systems. Sanskrit texts describe it as building blood, cooling, excess internal fire, and restoring vigor after depletion. In traditional Chinese medicine, nettle appears in formulas for kidney deficiency and chronic fatigue. Across the Atlantic, the Ojibwe and other Great Lakes nations use nettle preparations for aching joints and general weakness. Pour tradition, one plant, consiste d'application. Nettle leaf is one of the richest plant sources of magnesium available, approximately 160 milligrams per 100 grams of dried leaf, which concentrates as nettles dry. It also provides significant iron, calcium, silicon, and vitamins A, C, and K. The combination of magnesium and iron in a single whole food source is unusual, and clinically relevant magnesium deficiency and iron deficiency anemia frequently co-occur because magnesium is required for proper iron metabolism at the cellular level. Giving a depleted person, nettle addresses both deficiencies simultaneously, which is exactly what the medieval infirmary nurses were observing. Without the language of biochemistry, the preparation detail almost no guide mentions the sting of fresh nettles is entirely neutralized by drying, blanching, or steeping in hot water, but the medicinal compounds are not. A nettle infusion made from dried leaf, 1 tablespoon of dried nettle, steeped in 16 ounces of just boiled water for at least 15 minutes. Covered, so the volatile compounds don't escape, with the steam produces a deep green tea with an earthy, slightly minerally taste. This is called a long infusion. And herbalists, who study mineral content, specifically recommend it over short steeping times. The magnesium content of a long nettle infusion is measurably higher than a brief steep. Hildegard prescribed it. The Ojibwe relied on it. The medieval hospitals used it. Modern herbalists are rediscovering why. Number 4. Moringa. The tree that feeds itself, to the body that needs it most. The moringa tree, Moringa oleifera, has over 200 documented names across African and Asian cultures. In Sanskrit, it is called shigru, meaning swift arrow, because of how quickly its effects were said to be felt. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest texts in continuous use on Earth, references moringa in the context of healing preparations. In ancient Egypt, moringa oil was found sealed in clay vessels in pharaohs' tombs, placed there because it was too valuable to leave behind. The Ptolemaic Egyptians pressed the oil for cosmetics and medicine and traded it across the Mediterranean. Across sub-Saharan Africa, multiple independent cultures arrived at the same conclusion. Moringa leaves could prevent malnutrition. Mothers with insufficient breast milk were given moringa. Children with visible signs of deficiency were given moringa. Elderly people failing to thrive were given moringa. The pattern of use culturally divergent people arriving at the same nutritional intervention for the same conditions is one of the most compelling arguments in ethnobotany for a plant's real efficacy. The nutritional profile of moringa leaf makes these patterns comprehensible. Dried moringa leaf contains approximately 142 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams, exceptional for a leaf. It also provides complete protein, containing all 9 essential amino acids, which is extraordinarily rare for a plant. It delivers iron at roughly 4 times the concentration of spinach, along with vitamin A, at levels that rival liver. Researchers studying moringa's specific compounds have identified isothiocyanates, the same class of compounds found in broccoli and other cruciferous vegetables, which appear to activate the body's own antioxidant defense pathways via a protein called NRF2. A 2014 randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Food Science and Technology found that women who consumed moringa leaf powder daily showed significant improvements in blood hemoglobin levels compared to a control group. The effect size was large enough to be clinically meaningful. Preparation moringa leaf powder made by drying leaves at low temperature and grinding them retains more active compounds than cooked leaves. Add 1 teaspoon of powder to cool or lukewarm water. Not hot, since sustained heat degrades the isothiocyanates that appear to drive many of its effects. Stir it into yogurt. Add it to a smoothie after blending. The taste is grassy, mildly bitter, and faintly reminiscent of green tea. Start with half a teaspoon if you are new to it. Moringa is potent enough that some people experience digestive adjustment in the first few days. Ancient people called it the tree of life. Modern nutritional science is beginning to understand why that name was earned. Number 3. Seaweed. The ancient food that contains an entire ocean's worth of minerals. The oldest known record of seaweed consumption dates to approximately 14,000 years ago, from archaeological sites in Monteverde, Chile, predating the agricultural revolution by thousands of years. Before humans grew their food, they harvested it from the sea. Japanese medical texts from the Nara period, 8th century CE, document the use of kombu, a brown kelp, as a treatment for goiter, a condition caused by iodine deficiency. This is one of the earliest recorded examples of treating a mineral deficiency with a targeted food intervention. In ancient Ireland, red algae, called dulse, was a dietary staple along coastal communities, and Irish medieval manuscripts describe it as a strengthening food for people weakened by illness. In the Hawaiian tradition, over 70 species of limu seaweed were used in medicine and food. With specific species prescribed for specific conditions, seaweed is among the most mineral-dense foods on Earth. And the reason is elegant. It lives in seawater, which contains virtually every mineral in the periodic table, and spends its entire life actively concentrating those minerals into its tissue. Magnesium content varies significantly by species, but brown kelp varieties commonly provide over 100 milligrams per 100 grams of dried weight, along with iodine, selenium, potassium, calcium, and fucoidan, a sulfated polysaccharide found almost exclusively in seaweed that has attracted significant research interest for its potential effects on immune modulation and inflammation. The compound, most researchers are currently focused on fucoidan. A 2021 review in the journal Marine Drugs analyzed multiple clinical and laboratory studies and found consistent evidence that fucoidan influences inflammatory pathways, with some researchers proposing it may support normal immune surveillance. The science is early, but the interest from major research institutions is substantial. Preparation note: dried wakame, available at most Asian grocery stores, rehydrates in 5 minutes in cool water and adds mineral content to salads, soups, and rice dishes without significantly altering the flavor. A tablespoon of dried wakame provides roughly 100 milligrams of magnesium when rehydrated. Do not boil seaweed for extended periods. Prolonged heat degrades fucoidan content. Add it to soups after they come off the heat. Or eat it cold in a sesame dressing with rice vinegar and a few drops of sesame oil, which is close to how Japanese coastal populations have consumed it for centuries. The ancient Yomon people of Japan, the coastal Irish, the Hawaiian Ali'i, they all arrived at the same food from the same ocean. Modern biochemistry is beginning to understand what they already knew. Number 2. Amaranth. The grain that was banned by an emperor and why that matters. In 1519, Hernán Cortés and his forces arrived in what is now Mexico. What they found was a civilization that had built the largest city in the Western Hemisphere, Tenochtitlan, fed in significant part by a grain the Aztecs called huautli. We call it amaranth. Amaranth was not merely food to the Aztec people. It was medicine, currency, and ritual. During major ceremonies, amaranth seeds were ground with honey and human blood, symbolic, not literal in later interpretations, and pressed into figures representing their gods. Worshippers would then break pieces off and eat them, corté, interpreting this as a perverse imitation of Christian communion, made it a capital offense to grow, possess, or consume amaranth. Entire fields were burned. The penalty for cultivation was the loss of both hands. A grain was made illegal. That should tell you something about its significance. The Aztecs were not the only civilization to recognize amaranth's power. In ancient India, amaranth, called Rajgira, meaning king's grain, was consumed during religious fasting periods when all other grains were forbidden. The logic was that it provided enough sustenance to maintain health through extended fasting. In ancient Greece, amaranth, whose name comes from the Greek amaranthos, meaning unfading, was a symbol of immortality and used in funeral rites to represent the continuation of life. In pre-colonial Africa, a closely related species called Amaranthus hybridus was a staple leafy green across multiple regions, 3 continents, independent civilizations. The same plant, valued above all others. Modern analysis reveals why. Amaranth provides approximately 266 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams of uncooked grain, one of the highest magnesium concentrations of any grain food. It is also one of the only plant sources of complete protein, providing all essential amino acids, including lysine, which is typically scarce in grain-based diets. It contains squalene, a compound also found in shark liver oil and olive oil, which research suggests may support cellular membrane integrity and antioxidant function, and it is entirely gluten-free, making its mineral content fully accessible to people whose intestinal lining is compromised by gluten sensitivity. The preparation detail that most guides omit: amaranth must be thoroughly rinsed before cooking to remove saponin's bitter, soap-like compounds on the seed's surface that reduce mineral absorption and can cause digestive irritation. Rinse in a fine mesh strainer under cold running water for 2 full minutes, until the water runs clear. Then cook using a 2.5 to 1 water ratio, 2.5 cups of water per cup of amaranth, simmering covered for 20 minutes until a porridge-like consistency forms. Add raw honey and a pinch of sea salt after cooking. This is close to the traditional Aztec preparation. The Spanish emperor tried to erase this grain from history. It survived in the mountains of Mexico and the highlands of Peru, and now it's in every health food store in America. Some knowledge is too valuable to destroy. Number 1. Nettle seed. The part of the nettle everyone discards and shouldn't. We discussed nettle leaf at number 5. Now we need to talk about the part that almost no one knows about. The seed. While herbalists in traditional European practice focused primarily on nettle leaf and root, a small body of historical practice preserved largely in Tudor-era English herbalism and in Welsh folk medicine specifically documented the seed for a different and more acute purpose. Where the leaf was used for building and restoring over time, the seed was given to people in states of exhaustion, so profound they had lost the ability to function. Medieval accounts describe it being given to horses broken by overwork to restore stamina, and then given to the farmers themselves for the same purpose. Nicholas Culpeper, the 17th century English herbalist and physician, whose complete herbal of 1653 remains one of the most comprehensive pre-modern botanical references, described nettle seed as having warming and stimulating properties distinct from the leaf, and recommended it specifically for those wasted by long sickness. Modern Western herbalism has rediscovered nettle seed through the work of practitioners like David Hoffman and Michael Moore, who began documenting its effects on what they described as adrenal fatigue, a state of chronic stress-driven exhaustion in the late 20th century. Contemporary clinical herbalist Rosalie de la Forêt has documented the seed's apparent effects on kidney and adrenal function specifically, noting that traditional use patterns across multiple European cultures consistently link the seed, not the leaf, to restoration of deep energy reserves. Here is the phytochemical story. Nettle seed contains lectins, plant sterols, and a profile of fatty acids distinct from the leaf. It also contains a higher concentration of serotonin, yes, actual serotonin, in the plant itself than almost any other plant food. Researchers are studying how plant-derived serotonin interacts with human gut lining receptors. Since 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in and stored by the gut, the mechanism is not fully understood. But the pattern of historical observation, energizing, restoring, lifting chronic fatigue, is consistent across centuries and cultures. Magnesium content in nettle seed is significant. Estimates range from 120 to 180 milligrams per 100 grams. Varying by harvest timing, the seed is most potent when harvested in late summer, just as it reaches maturity, but before it fully dries and drops. The color at this stage is pale green, slightly translucent. Dried seeds are also effective, though less so. Preparation: 1 teaspoon of dried nettle seeds, not the leaf. The seed added to a morning smoothie, mixed into yogurt, or chewed directly. The taste is mildly grassy, with a slight oiliness. Some people add them to granola. Traditional use in parts of Wales involved mixing the seeds with raw honey and eating a small amount, roughly 1 teaspoon daily, as a morning tonic during periods of illness, recovery, or winter fatigue. Start with half a teaspoon. Nettle seed is considered more stimulating than nettle leaf, and some people find it activating enough to affect sleep if taken in the evening. The Aztec farmers lost their hands for growing amaranth. Medieval monks preserved nettle seed knowledge through the Black Death. Welsh healers passed it from mother to daughter for generations. The part that everyone discards? The part that might matter most. Here is the one thing that connects every plant on this list, and it is the thing the food industry has worked hardest to make you forget. Every single active compound we've discussed today, the linalool in basil, the fucoidan in seaweed, the isothiocyanates in moringa, the serotonin in nettle seed, the squalene in amaranth exists, in concentrated form, only in the whole plant, prepared with respect for its biology. When you heat a plant above a certain temperature, and that threshold varies, but for most delicate compounds, it is somewhere between 160 and 212 degrees Fahrenheit, you begin destroying what you were trying to capture. When you refine a grain, removing the bran and germ to make it shelf-stable and uniform, you remove the part of the grain where magnesium concentrates. When you dry an herb at high heat to reduce processing time, you eliminate the volatile oils that gave it its traditional function. The ancient cooks didn't know the names of these compounds, but they developed through thousands of years of careful daily observation, preparation methods that happen to preserve them, cold steeping, short simmering, eating fresh, using the whole plant, including the parts that look like waste, adding acid lemon juice, vinegar to enhance mineral uptake. These weren't accidents or superstitions. They were the accumulated clinical observations of 10,000 generations of people paying close attention to how food made them feel. The pharmaceutical industry cannot patent a plant. It can only isolate one compound, synthesize it, and sell you a fraction of what the whole food provided. The question worth sitting with after this video ends is this: if our great-grandparents maintained their health into old age on food grown in their gardens and foraged from their fields without supplements, without pharmaceuticals, without the $5 billion wellness industry, what exactly are we buying that they already had? If that question matters to you, hit like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment below telling us which plant on this list surprised you most and which one you're going to try first. Because that comment might just become the subject of our next video. We'll see you there.